Thank you very much, and let me know if you have any difficulty hearing me, please. So far, so good? All right. So, speaking at this art fair, I can't help but recall 2 years ago. Hello. 2 years ago, I gave a talk just the day before the opening of Art Basel, Miami, and unbelievable how things have changed. If you are involved in the art world in one way or another, I'm sure you remember how boiling hot the art market was 2 years ago. I mean, for a lot of galleries, you had to beg to get on a waiting list. As a friend of mine told me, she asked to get on a waiting list, and a dealer said to her, politely, but he said to her, not in your lifetime. Sotheby's and Christie's were selling art in multiples of the value of what's been sold at the most recent auctions. Artists from China and from India were setting auction records. Hedge fund whizzes, at least some of them, were seeking trophy art at extraordinary prices, and allegedly sometimes didn't even look at the work of art or only a slide. But wow, how things have changed in the past 2 years. It's very different now, and to your advantage as a collector, which I'll get to in a minute. So on to the matter at hand, how I get to the point of asking for an invoice. And I have to tell you that this is my point of view. It's my approach. Maybe it'll be resonant for some other people. Maybe it'll seem like a terrible way to go about doing things, but it's at least what I do and how I get to it. And my background in acquiring art has been very much impacted by directing art museums. I find a lot of different kinds of contemporary art interesting, but frankly, not all really lends itself to being collected. Some of it could be entirely conceptual, some of it could be ephemeral, some of it could be environmental, and you can never get it into a museum. But when it comes to conceiving what a museum's collection should be and what you should actually be acquiring with the dollars that are available, at the end of the day, that was my job as a museum director, and same thing as a corporate curator and even as an advisor, to come up with what to buy, how to make that commitment. So I want to say something that might sound so incredibly obvious to most everybody, but I believe that some works of art are better than others. Some works of art convey broader and deeper meaning and are more rewarding to spend time with over years. And that might seem terribly obvious to you, but in some circles, talking about quality is considered incredibly old-fashioned and bourgeois and totally irrelevant. And instead, art is viewed as primarily cultural production. The word art is often not even used. And for the people who take that approach, I think what interests them primarily is what art has to tell us about issues of politics, issues of gender, issues of race, and all that is really incredibly fascinating. But at the end of the day, when you're building a collection, I think you have to wrestle with the issue of quality. What's the best work out there by an artist? So when I directed art museums, I found curating exhibitions and acquiring art both wonderful privileges to be involved in. Exhibitions are, among other things, very important for teaching new ways of seeing things. Acquisitions are important as a baseline of high points along the highway of art. But here's the thing about an exhibition. An exhibition does come and go. An acquisition, at least in theory, stays in the museum forever. There's a lot riding on adding a work to the collection. And so I think the process should be like having an object in your hand and turning it over and over again, knowing it from all angles, and eventually getting to the point where you develop conviction about its lasting value. At one museum I directed, when I proposed an acquisition, price never was the first question. Price, the cost of the work of art, did come along in the discussion, but never first. The first question was, why this artist? Why this particular work? Is this a signature work by this artist? Are there greater works still available in private collections that might come on the market someday that would be better to wait for? So I think that their belief was that if the price was somewhere in the ballpark, or even on occasions a little bit ahead of the market, over the long haul, the value of a work of rare excellence would take care of itself. And having conviction about the quality of that particular work, that's what it's about. And I think that to the extent that circumstances allow, the same kind of deliberation should take place when buying works of art for yourself. A circumstance that doesn't readily lend itself to that kind of deliberation is not being given much time to consider buying a work of art. And that was often the case at art fairs until the onset of the sagging economy. I think that now acquiring art is somewhat less competitive than it was before September 2008. But you know, if you are not extended the opportunity to have some time to consider the work of art that you're looking at, I really only know of two possible responses to that pressured condition. Number one, buy a work of art by an artist whose work you've seen a great deal so that you can readily size up the relative quality of that work that you're looking at. No one hits a home run every time. Artists are human beings. Absent that kind of familiarity with the artist, use only discretionary money because who knows what's going to happen over the long haul. So let me now begin to start focusing a little bit more on the process of deliberation of whether to buy something. And at least for me, what swings the two? Give me an invoice. So again, this is just really what works for me. Different collectors have different commitment criteria, but an odd thing is that even though some of my friends who work in a totally different way, we often wind up loving the same works of art, which I think speaks somehow about power that art has. I'm going to be focusing on artists who are early on in their careers or just maybe a bit beyond, not who've been around for decades where you've had ample time to decide, you know, what your assessment is. I think it's very challenging to look at artists who are new on the horizon, new on the field, because you really are more on your own. If you're going to be looking at artists who've been around for a while and the work of art's already been on the market and up in private collections and back on the market, there are other sets of issues that you have to be a bit more concerned about. Like the condition of the work is more important if it's going to be 50 years or 100 years old or whatever. And the authenticity of the work to make sure that the title is in proper order. And even the pricing criteria, which are much more complicated on the secondary market. Let me just quickly eliminate what I think has very limited value in deciding what to acquire a work, and that's what I call extrinsic factors, most notably trying to predict the market. People have tried to devise another book just came out recently. People have tried to devise market prediction systems, but so far no system has proven really dependable. Otherwise, that's how everybody would be buying art. And besides, if you use a system, you know, and you're buying an artist sort of on the emerging side, what happens when you plunk down your money and without caring about that work of art, but because maybe buying art with your ears, you hear that this is a hot artist or something like that, and the artist doesn't make it big. Then you're stuck with something that hasn't helped you out financially and something you don't even like. So first and foremost, I think you have to begin with works of art that add meaning to your life, as corny as it might sound, that make you feel more fully alive. So I think the most valuable process for making a decision about buying something is intrinsic, not extrinsic things like market buzz, but intrinsic, making your own educated judgment. The collectors I know, many of them really great, extraordinary, famous collectors who have a wonderful track record of getting artists early on in their career who really go places, really do it on the basis of their personal interaction with that work of art, not with extrinsic art market guessing games. I was really quite taken aback recently when I was visiting with an art consultant and mentioned an artist whose work I found interesting, and she said, "Oh, his market is over." And you know, in my view, that has nothing to do with the quality of the work of art itself. The quality is one thing. Market buzz might impact on the price of the work of art, but not with its inherent quality. So some extrinsic factors, I think, are helpful in making a decision of what to buy, like whatever you can find out about the artist's life could be a factor, his times, her times, whatever can be a factor. But you know, it's really secondary. First, there's got to be that initial connection with the work of art. One moment, connection with water. I think also, by the way, based on my own experience, it's prudent to find out things like that. What's the title of that work of art? Because it could be the title you'll find out is something that's going to have very bad associations for you. Sorry. or you want to find out what materials the work of art is made out of to make sure it's not going to be fugitive and fall apart in a couple of years. But I want to tell you the process that works for me, and again, this is very, very personal. So it starts by this, not by coughing. When I walk into a gallery or museum and I see a painting by Rembrandt, I get what I call a Rembrandt feeling. It's really like no other experience that I get. If I look at a Cindy Sherman, I get a Cindy Sherman feeling. If I look at a Monet, I get a Monet feeling. If I look at a Lorna Simpson, a Daniel Berman, whoever it is, I'm getting an experience that is just unique to that visual encounter. And here's what I think is going on. This is just my analysis of how that works inside of me. I think it's very important for the artist to learn how to be herself in a work of art. That sounds so simple, but it encompasses head and heart and time and place, and that's a lot to share. I think that the artists who know how to be themselves in their art have just matured into the people that they are, and they know how to communicate who they are as human beings. It's number one for an artist to do. What happens is that for the viewer, you're starting with a physical object, the work of art, and then being in communication through the work of art with the artist. And ultimately, for me, again, this is something a lot of people would disagree with, I find that an experience to go beyond the physical object. For me, it's really metaphysical. I mean, I think that what's moving about art crosses the oceans and crosses the centuries. So for me, it's something beginning with the object and it winds up being beyond the physical object, something that's metaphysical. And, you know, knowing something factually about the artist's head and heart and time and place, that can deepen your experience, sure. The more efficiently the artist can be of herself in the work of art, the more powerful the communication. The more efficiently you know how to be yourself in the work of art, I think the greater the impact the work of art has. And for me, a necessary starting place, I like Beethoven, that's great. Gives me a Beethoven feeling. So I think that a work of art has to be visually compelling. I think it has to attract you visually so that at least, you know, it can do its thing to you. So a lot of people don't believe in that either anymore. So anyway, when the work of art is doing its thing, you're connected. I'm connected. It's unique, it's transporting, it's interactive. It's an experience for me that is unique to that work of art and the human being who created it. So let me tell you what I immediately eliminate from consideration in a work of art, two factors that I think are very damaging to quality. When I look at works by emerging artists, some are to various degrees hopelessly, helplessly reminiscent of works by other artists. Now, I'm not talking about the rare occasions when an artist is intentionally doing that. I'm talking about when it's like when you hear maybe a new song by a singer, you know, and you say, oh, gee, that sounds too much like somebody else I already know. That's what I'm talking about. See, it's just if it's too much like somebody else, then what that means to me is the artist hasn't learned to be himself or herself in that work of art. Billie Holiday said this nifty little quote, if I'm going to sing like someone else, I don't need to sing at all. In other words, she's doing her own thing. And the second reason that I eliminate a work from immediate consideration is when a section or a passage of that work is inept, just out of whack with the rest of the work of art. Because now I'm thinking about, ooh, that doesn't work, or that's not right, so that like immediately stops my getting involved with the experience of that work of art. So that's what works for me. I need to be connected, I need to enter into another world. It reminds me that years ago when the movie critics Siskel and Ebert, some of you might remember them, and when they worked together, they spoke about how involving a movie can be and take you right out of your seat. And that's analogous to the kind of experience I'm talking about. To be honest with you, that type of connection doesn't happen with me the first time I see every work of art. Sometimes it does. Sometimes I need to spend some time developing a relation with the work of art. And I'm sure that that relation is there for the taking in some works of art. And because I have limitations, we all do, I just don't get it. I hope that doesn't happen too often, though. But I think for the reasons I'm saying now, it's best to take some time with a work of art and not just go with an initial judgment. I think you've got to really see if your infatuation is something that's going to be lasting, and I'm going to talk some more about that later. It takes time, you know, for what I'm talking about, to develop this commitment criteria, and different people have different ones. It takes time to develop this system of judgment. And I think to get there, it just requires looking at a lot of art. It takes experience, it takes practice, just a lot of comparison and contrast of works of art, and also keeping an open mind. So developing this commitment criterion is really, I think, knowing where you stand, I think, is really where you want to be operating from when you're thinking of buying a work of art. Ideally, that's where you want to be operating from. And some of you who are new to collecting, if you haven't done this, you know, you could sort of make a virtual collection. You could just, you know, gather JPEGs or ask dealers to send you JPEGs of works of art that really compel you, and make a little notebook and keep looking at those images and think about, is this really wonderful, and why is it wonderful, and what do I look for in works of art? You can kind of have a practice notebook that way. I want to go on to things that are a bit more specific now, that are just not quite as personal to me, and maybe will be useful to you. I call them corollaries. I'm going to give you 4 corollaries to my approach. One of them is that in responding to a work of art, I try to keep in mind that there are no a prioris. There are no givens for artists or artists. I don't think it helps anything to say, I don't want to look at a work of art that uses Photoshop. I don't care for a work of art that's made out of clay. I don't want to look at a work of art that the artist has not herself personally touched. None of that, I think, is at all helpful, because my thesis, if what makes a work of art really significant is the artist has learned how to be herself in a work of art, then that's got to go wherever it goes. And if it means using Photoshop, if it means using clay, if it means touching a canvas yourself, if it means having other people produce a work of art for you as a result of a very strong vision you have, anything is fine as long as the result is a unique expression of that human being. Here's another corollary about being original. I think that works of art are automatically original when the artist has learned how to be himself in the work of art, because, like Mr. Rogers used to say, if you remember him, everybody's special, right? So if you're going to be yourself in the work of art, then it's going to be particular to your psychology, your biology, your experiences. And the kind of originality I'm talking about doesn't work if you say, gee, I'm a beginning artist. Now I got to come up with something really original, which usually means weird. That doesn't work. If your work's going to be weird, it's got to really grow out from who you are as a human being. So here's another corollary, which is that when I hunt for works of art, I don't look for anything different from what I look for in any work of art from any period. I look first and foremost for this transporting experience. You know, I make it a personal requirement to go to a museum in New York like the Frick, or a museum that has great works, the National Gallery in London, the National Gallery in Washington, just to go back and to make sure I'm keeping those touchstones in mind. For me, excellence is excellence, no matter when the work of art was made. So for me, I don't make any distinction. If, you know, people say to me, I don't like contemporary art. I don't really understand that. Art is art. Art of excellence, there's always art of excellence being made since cave paintings. It's hard to sort through it when it's more recent, because that sorting hasn't been done for you, but excellence is excellence, quality is quality if that communication happens. And the fourth and final corollary is I try to keep my eye on the ball, and that means to be informed by what I read and informed by what I see in museums, but ultimately to make a decision of what to buy based on my own criterion and not on market buzz. So helps to know about the artist market when you're negotiating a price, but that comes after having conviction that this is a work of art that really makes you feel more fully alive, that enriches you. So there are a few more practical things that I like to do before I say, give me an invoice. One thing, of course, is that I try to see as many examples of work by an artist that I possibly can, to see, as I said before, which one hopefully is going to be a home run. I try to get a reserve on a work of art, just talking about it at an art fair now, for for 24 hours, or at least for several hours, so that I can go back. Maybe my blood sugar level will be different. I've had something to eat, or my sleep rhythms are different, or who knows what, and take a second look to get conviction that my initial rush is something still there, that I still really love it. So taking time is helpful. And what I'm going to suggest now, it's tough to do in an art fair, but you can do it in a gallery certainly, and that is ask to change the amount of light on the work. I think at art fairs, and certainly even in most galleries, works of art are overlit. And when they're overlit, that tends to wash out detail. So I often ask if they'll change the light, and sometimes if it can be easily moved, even moved to a different wall where the light is going to be different. And last point, speaking about moving to a different wall, tough to do also at an art fair, but I think that helps a lot as well. Because if you take the work of art that you're considering and putting it next to another work of art, that can often give you new perspectives and help to firm up your conviction. So quick review, we're at the end. I connect with art in a way that works for me. I take some time to confirm my conviction. I do a background check, make sure the title doesn't freak me out or the work's not going to fall apart or whatever it is. If an emerging artist, I'm willing to take a chance on my instincts. I do a price check, which we haven't had time to talk about. Then I ask for an invoice. One last thing before getting into questions. Again, being at an art fair and talking to you, just a few things about gallerists. Sometimes in popular culture, gallerists get a bad rap. Let me tell you this. If you want to have a gallery focusing on works by emerging artists, that's not a smart thing to do as a way to get rich. Now, everybody would like to get wealthy, sure, and sometimes it works out. But so you sell works of art that are $5,000 or $10,000, and you split 50% with the artist. How many times over do you have to sell works of art to make a decent living, to pay your expenses, to pay something appropriate to the people who work for you? I mean, it's not a smart business plan. I think that the reason why gallerists get involved with art is because they love art. And where that takes me is I advise people not to get involved exclusively with a single gallery. I think different gallerists love art. They have their different visions of what art is meaningful. They're all looking to represent the artists who they think are the great artists. And it's good to get these different perspectives and different points of view. And this is a great place to do it. There are 100 galleries out there. So that's it. And I guess we have time for a couple of questions. Is that right? Okay, thank you. Anything at all, please. We have a brave soul back there.
I don't have to yell. You mentioned that in evaluating artwork, you don't pay too much attention to how it was made or the process through which it was made, whether it was touched, whether by the artist or not, etc. But could you speak a little bit more about your attitude towards skill and skillful execution? Doesn't skill invest the artwork with a certain degree of meaning or value that perhaps has some financial impact?
It's a great question, the role of skill. For me, skill is a means. It's not really an end. You know, I can be seduced by the skill of a work of art and think it's absolutely awesome. But then I kind of have to ask myself, am I going to care about this in a year or two or 5 years or 10 years? I don't think that skill alone is enough to do the job over the long haul. And again, when it comes to skill, what does one mean by skill? By skill, some people would mean the artist's actual touch, okay? For some people, an artist like Jeff Koons, the skill can be having a precise vision of what is to be realized and the skills of working with fabricators and all kinds of other people to realize that vision in an almost fanatically exact and precise way. Different kind of skill. So for me, skill is interesting, enjoyable, but it's like prettiness. That's fine, but I don't really know that prettiness is enough to maintain interest over the years. Same thing with skill alone. It's a means, not an end. Good question, though.
I was wondering, when dealing with clients, how you approach when the client wants to hang something in their home and maybe doesn't want to honor the vision of the artist as much as they should, like hang it incorrectly or sideways or something like that. How do you approach that to make them understand how important the artist's vision is?
Well, artists are where it all begins. You know, the rest of us are secondary or tertiary. So I think having respect for the artist's vision is absolutely paramount. I think it's the dealer's, if you're buying the work from a dealer, I think it's the dealer's responsibility to make clear how a work of art needs to be installed if that installation is part of the work of art, so to speak. If it needs to be installed in a way that is particular to realizing what that work of art is, I think the dealer has a responsibility, if it's not clear to you, to make that clear, so that then the work of art does not get disrespected, hung upside down or whatever. Is that an answer? Explain it to them and tell them quite clearly if they can't respect it, they shouldn't be doing it. And incidentally, there are also legal issues about that. My wife's an art attorney. Hi.
So how much do you rely on the gallery from which you're buying the piece?
Well, I rely on galleries a lot because I don't have time to go exclusively to studios. That's the honest truth. Generally, I only go to a studio if someone says to me, the artist, someone who I respect says, this is a terrific artist, not showing work at a gallery, you should go see it, I'll go see it. Or if I'm working with the gallery because I like an artist's work a lot, and the dealer says there isn't anything available, the dealer calls and says, there's some new work in the studio, get over there. But I mean, I do rely on dealers a great deal. I have to make my own judgment about the work of art, but I do rely on dealers to bring material that's worth looking at. I still have to make up my own mind. Sometimes they can give me more background about a work of art. Sometimes they're great at addressing those issues. You know, you should know that this work of art is made out of mud and straw. And you know, it's probably going to be all right in 3 or 5 or 10 years, but just want to alert you to that issue. And frankly, the dealers that I've dealt with, 99% of them are responsible and do that. They don't want to have unhappy customers.
Have you ever bought a work on spec in a way by not understanding the work, but having
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
Okay, have you ever bought a work sort of on spec, like not knowing, not understanding the work, but having the feeling that it might grow on you?
Can I put it? No. Or at least I hope I haven't. You know, it's maybe not understanding it because I think that works of art, like human beings, are not always easily understood, but you can still find their personality very rewarding and very interesting. So I have to have a connection with a work of art, but I don't always understand it. And if I thought that I immediately understood all there was to know about the work of art, that would concern me. And I know that some works of art don't give up all their secrets easily, and that's fine too. But I have to have a connection with it, even if I can't put it into words. Nor do I think an artist has to put it into words. That's not an artist's job.
If you have a small collection of art and you want to sell 1 or 2 pieces, what is the best way to go about selling those pieces?
Let me think about that. Well, I think it's often good to go back to the dealer if you bought it from a dealer. I think that the dealers generally value that because they like to look after the careers of their artists. That's what a dealer does. And so the dealer might have some, if the dealer can buy it back from you if the price is reasonable, then the dealer can have a hand in placing where that work of art goes next. If the work of art has been already tested on the auction market, or it might be of interest to an auction house, that's a good possibility as well. Always go to more than one auction house, get competitive bids. I wouldn't do eBay, nothing against eBay for certain things, but I don't think there's enough control. That's my opinion. So time for one last?
Okay. What was the last piece of artwork that you bought and why?
I don't remember. Oh, I actually bought, well, I did, oh, all right. I was thinking I don't remember because I'm talking about what I've done for museums and corporations, and I can tell you about a lot of those, but actually bought a work of art very recently, a small work of art with my wife. And in this case, this is an artist whose work I have known for 4 or 5 years and actually had bought for a corporate collection. And I've often found her work just totally captivating. And I like it because, what can I say? It feels good to look at because of its intricacy, because of its beauty. It's a kind of work that doesn't give up all of its secrets easily. I'm dying to get it delivered so I can look at it some more. You know, I don't really know what more I could tell you. I'm sorry? I don't know if that's appropriate for me to say. Makes me, maybe I'll tell you one-on-one, tell you later. I just feel uneasy like doing a marketing thing for a gallery, even though I love the gallery. Come on up and I'm happy to tell you.
When the viewer understands what the artist is saying, and that is the complete conversation. And to me, a piece of art is like falling in love with a man, or for a man with a woman. You see that work, and you just have to have it, and you want to take it home. And there doesn't have to be any explanation. And you can put a dog into the middle of a gallery because the art sells itself. If a buyer is influenced by the drama or the conversation or the dialogue, the art consultant or the sales rep tells you it's not a true purchase.
You have to have your own personal reaction. That's really what it's about. One of the interesting things about art is that different people have different reactions or different responses, but can still all love that work of art. That's right. Yes?
How important is it for you to have known the artist or heard or followed the artist for a while before you buy the first piece?
That's a really good question. I have one, I said, you know, people go about this different ways. I have one friend who believes he makes it a requirement to sit down with the artist and conduct an interview, and he takes notes. I couldn't care less about that for me. I get a kick out of meeting the artist later. I'm fascinated at times by doing that, but for me, I just want the relationship to be between me and the work of art. And the artist's personality or whatever, not really relevant in making a decision to ask for an invoice. Okay? Okay, thank you very much.